Talktainment Radio Worldwide Sound. Talktainmentradio.com. We give you a reason to come. The world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay. Radio, the way it should be heard. You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
This is the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
Good morning, and welcome to TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. And you are in touch with the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller. I'm Mr. Bobby, and this is radio the way it should be heard. On the line with me this morning, as usual, is Mr. Fuller from Washington, D.C., and we'd like to say good morning, Mr. Fuller, and how are you this morning?
Good morning, and I'm still learning.
Very good, very good. We have off the bat three questions people have emailed me, and I'm going to get to those questions. But before we do that, we'd like to open up this morning's program with this. To all my listeners, or all Mr. Fuller's listeners, you can contact the show by calling 1-877-932-9766. Pardon me. And Mr. Fuller will be glad to answer any questions that you may have. I'd like for you to talk about your book, the title of it, and where you can get it before we get into what you want to speak about this morning.
Well, the basic title is The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. Now, those words are defined within the book itself, but basically, just generally speaking, it just indicates that people, when they go about doing what they do, are compensating. Every move that people make, they're compensating for something that's missing. In other words, they're trying to get something done that's not done. That's a compensatory move. Even when you're walking, you are compensating for not being where you want to be or where you intend to be. And you're walking in the direction to try to reach that particular destination. That's a compensatory act. And when you do it as an individual, you might say you're independent in doing it. And so, because you're just one person in the act of walking. And you have a code for doing that. That's a part of the title of the book, too, United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. You have a code for walking. In other words, it's a certain way to walk in order to walk in the most efficient manner in order to get where you're going. You can walk at a slow pace, a fast pace. It depends on the urgency of your needs, of your compensatory needs. And it's also a system, and it's also a concept. But then I applied the same basic format in the subtitle of the book, Textbook Workbook for Thought, Speech, and or Action for Victims of Racism. So when you're born in a system of racism, you also should have a code or a system or a concept for compensating for having been born in a system of racism. In this case, a system of white supremacy, which is a system that is based on mistreating people, dominating and mistreating people based on color. That's all it is. It's just a form of royalism or a form of capitalism or a form of, you might say, communalism or communism, where people just kind of band together and have that common cause of saying, we are going to dominate and mistreat people based on those people's color. And we're going to derive benefits from it. Benefits like what? Compensatory benefits, like material gain and fun and glory. That's the big three of racism. If you want to know what a racist is after, that's basically what they're after in the modern day. In ancient times, it might have been something else. But in the modern day, it's material gain plus fun plus glory, by whatever definitions you would like to attach to that. Now, you can get the basic book for the victims of this type of thing, because the victims have a reaction to it. You can get it by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And that's the book that I've written that addresses this particular problem.
Okay. Very good. Before we get to what you would like to talk about, we do have a caller on the line already. So, caller, if you are there, go ahead and state your question for Mr. Fuller.
Hello, Dr. Fuller. I just want to say thank you again for doing what you're doing. But my question is in regards to the Ray Rice and Ferguson case. Do you think that there's anything related? Do you think there's a relationship between the two? And this, and also with the anti-gun members after the Sandy Hook case, you had all these people who were talking about anti-guns. But I don't know if they were ever saying that police shouldn't have guns. So I want to hear what you think about that. If the anti-gun people were also saying that police shouldn't have guns, which would prevent these types of shootings in regards to the Ferguson situation. And then do you think that the Ray Rice situation was kind of like, because I saw a post from one of my white friends, from a friend of a friend, and it said that because black people do the things like they did in the Ray Rice situation, they should get shot. So when I saw that, I thought, oh man, what if this Ray Rice case was just like a propaganda to show certain people that what the police did in Ferguson was justified because black people are dangerous, and things like that. And then I saw on ESPN, one of the white guys on ESPN said, it's a shame of our legal system. And he was talking about the Ray Rice situation. But when I listened to him talking about the Ferguson case, he didn't say that it was a shame in our legal system. So I just want to hear what's your ideas about that.
Well, if I understand your composite question, basically it's about violence. And so we are in a violent system. The system of white supremacy is based on violence. It's based on killing people and beating people. If you're going to enslave people, that consists of violence. And there are two basic types of violence that the white supremacists use worldwide and always have used. And that is direct violence, and that is physical violence, killing people, beating them, inflicting some type of direct physical violence on a person. And then there's indirect violence, and that's the violence that comes with deceit. That's the one that they mainly use in the modern day. In other words, they say things that they don't mean. That causes people's minds to go in the direction that it shouldn't go. When you're fooling people, you fool someone to that person's detriment, you're taking something away from the person, you're making the person believe something that's not true, then you are committing violence against that person if you are gaining from having deceived that person. So that's the main thing that the white supremacists use. Not talking about all white people, just talking about the smartest and most powerful ones have chosen to run the world based on deceiving people and being violent against people based on color. Now, the people that they deceive and inflict violence upon pick up those things themselves. They pick up those habits. And that's why black people are usually confused when they get these mixed signals. They're saying, well, you shouldn't do that. You black people shouldn't be acting like that. Well, now, where did we get this teaching from? Where did we pick this up from? we go to school every day with our little books and whatnot, and the white supremacists have a lot to do with what's in the books, and so they say, be violent. I mean, be a war hero. Always find out a way to go to war against someone. And I have another chapter over here on being gangsters, all how to be a gangster. So read about that when you're 6 and 7 years old. I mean, and you're opening books where people are supposed to be guiding you in this great big world. And you see where everybody who's a hero has a sword in his hand or her hand. I mean, even you see statues of females sometimes, and they'll have a sword in one hand. And maybe the Statue of Justice, so-called, that's a female person carrying a scale and got on a blindfold and a sword in the other hand. Now, you're going to cut somebody and you can't even see them? What kind of message is this? See, so all of these little symbols and whatnot that we kind of take for granted, pay attention to them, because we are being told all the time, we have been given mixed signals. Be peaceful, be peaceful, be peaceful. And at the same time, make war, make war, make war. This is very confusing. And when people are confused, they're subject to do anything. So all this criticism of Ray Rice and whatnot, or black people's behavior, which in many cases is very terrible, but where did they learn it? Who's sending out these messages? We're actually just born little children, boys and girls, looking for guidance. Look at the kind of guidance we get. And then we are condemned for our behavior by the same people who are doing the guiding.
1-877-932-9766 is the number that you can call to get in contact with Mr. Fuller and ask him any questions that you may have. Thank you very much, caller. Thank you very much. Mr. Fuller, I do have a question here that came from an email, and it says this, that here in this particular city, there will be a community forum entitled, quote, Hands Up, Don't Shoot, where officer shootings of unarmed black men, including Ferguson, Missouri, will be discussed or debated. Members of law enforcement, attorneys, and city officials will be present. So my question is, this is the person writing, what types of questions should members of the community, he has that in quotations, ask these officials? What type should they ask so this doesn't become another run-of-the-mill forum loaded with emotional outbursts and no resolution? That was his first question. Could you respond to that, please?
Yes, that's why everything should be codified and everybody should understand the code. The part of the code that I have written that I would recommend is that when you're approached by a law enforcement officer, what should you do and what you should not do? And that shouldn't be just all over the place. That shouldn't be a process where you just, wing it and just some people do one thing and other people do something else. No, it should be exact. It should be razor sharp exact about what the officer does and says. I mean, word for word. It's got, over all these years where you hear this term police brutality, you shouldn't hear that anymore because there shouldn't be any confusion. See, it all comes from confusion. You have one law enforcement officer, he'll say this and say that. The one standing next to him will say this and say that. And the one in the patrol car across town is somewhere approaching someone, and he or she is saying this and saying that, and the people are responding this way and that way. No, it should be all orchestrated, just like musical notes in a well-tuned orchestra. I mean, like the violinist in an orchestra will play a certain note a certain way, exactly. Because if you're in a huge orchestra, particularly a symphonic orchestra, the conductor knows exactly when the person on the clarinet is out of tune or something like that, or not keeping up with the song and making the notes that should be made for that particular song. And when you're talking about a matter of existence or non-existence, somebody possibly getting killed, we're going to have to be exact about that. Otherwise, it's just going to keep having meetings about, well, we got another incident, and then even while we're having the meeting, we're having 15 other incidents we're going to have to respond to when we leave the meeting. This is comedy, but it's tragic comedy, and it should stop. And the way to stop it is to codify everything. What exactly do you do when you see those flashing lights in your rearview mirror? And it should be exact. What you say should be exact. I mean, everybody should understand exactly what you're going to say, word for word. The person driving the car and the officer who approaches the car. Now, it is codified up to a point, say it like on a traffic stop. But then it's a free-fall after that. I mean, sir or ma'am, show me your license and registration. So that's usual procedure, all right? And do you have any weapons in the car? In some places they ask that. Or do you have anything in the car that I should be suspicious of? Well, maybe that needs to be thought of and needs to be reviewed and all like that, because that question may be out of order. See what I mean? So in every municipality, every little town, every little village, every big city, and it should be taught in school, in the classrooms. That should be taught in the civics class, if you still have civics in the classes, or in any political discourse, or anything dealing with law enforcement. Every 10-year-old should know exactly what you do and what you say. I mean, whether you put your hands up in the air or what, or follow the officer's instructions, whatever they may be, or whatever it is. And the officer's instructions should always be exact. They shouldn't be winging it. They shouldn't be making statements like, you people and all like that. That's a no-no. You people. We people. We the people. That's what it is. I mean, that's the constitutional procedures. We're all people. So we don't have any you people and those people and all like that. And so the verbiage should always be razor sharp, exactly the same in every instance, word for word. Don't skip over any words. Don't leave out any words. Exactly what you say. And then among black people, this thing of acting like you're still in the 4th grade on the school ground, and some 30-year-olds still act that way, that should stop. That should stop. That invites more trouble. Hey, man, you ain't got no business doing this. You ain't got no business that. I mean, I know my rights, blah, blah, blah. No. That's escalating the situation and to the disadvantage of the person doing that kind of talking. Because most likely, they're going to lose. What's the point in losing? What's the point in saying anything when you're going to come out a loser? You want to come out a winner. Everybody should come out a winner in anything dealing with law enforcement. So that's my suggestion. Codify everything. If you go to these meetings and whatnot, rather than get into endless shouting matches, say, what is it for all time? I mean, for the next 10,000 years. What is it that a law enforcement officer, when he or she approaches a person, is supposed to say exactly like reading a movie script and not say? And what is it that the person who is being approached is supposed to do and say? Exactly, word for word. I think that's the only thing that will clear up this matter to some degree. That way you'll know when you get in court. Say, okay, let's go over what everybody said, because if anybody's off point, we got a serious problem here. because whoever's off point about what they said or did, that's the person who is going to be in the hot water.
1-877-932-9766 is the number that you may call to get in contact with Mr. Fuller, and we do have a phone line open, so if you have a question, you may call right now. Mr. Fuller, we like to start off the show with what you would like to discuss, anything that you have seen or heard, newsworthy, or something that you would like to bring up, and the platform is yours.
Well, I just want to mention something about Ebola, the disease that is supposed to be going in Sierra Leone and Liberia and several other places. And I'm going to say that sounds like, to me, another Tuskegee experiment. And people can just think about that. But that's what it sounds like. Sounds like it's following the same pattern. And that's, you have a disease, and then you send in people to see what the disease is and how it got started and what monkey it came from this time, like that virus called HIV. Okay? Every now and then, I'm not saying that this is exactly the case, but it looks suspicious. Every now and then, in the system of white supremacy, among dark-skinned people, there's a discovery of some new disease that no one ever heard of. No one has any idea where it comes from except from some monkey or from some black person fooling around with some type of animal. After all these thousands of years, these sudden diseases that come up among dark people. Just a few years ago, they said that HIV is highest among black women in Harlem, and then all of a sudden, in a twinkling, it jumped from Harlem to Haiti, and then from Haiti to Uganda, and jumping over all of those thousands of people, millions of people, from place to place, passing all by them. Weird. This is weird. And now we got something that sounds like Ebonics, talking about Ebola, and it's just mysteriously moving among dark people, and we got to go among these dark people and find out what it is before it spreads to everybody. But it's always among the dark people where it starts. I don't know what these dark people are doing. Maybe it's in their skin, but it always spreads from them. Every disease that you can name comes from them. I don't know what it is about these dark people. It's something about their darkness that kind of breeds all these diseases. Yeah, right.
Okay. You are listening to the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, and it is heard exclusively here on TalkTamitRadio.com. And if you would like to speak with Mr. Fuller and ask him some questions, you may at 1-877-932-9766. 1-877-932-9766 is the number you can call, and we do have a caller on the line. Go ahead, caller.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Fuller, I like what you were saying about how people should respond to the police. But I think that there's a problem that has to be overcome, because it's taken me about 25 years to understand what you were talking about what's happening to us. Because my understanding is that we are in a race war. The war is on us. Now, when I think of it like that, I understand things a lot better. Most of our people think that they have rights and that they are citizens. And when you have a confrontation or an engagement with people, first thing that pops in your mind is that, well, I have my rights and they need to look out and not violate my rights. But we are in a situation where we're treated as if we have no rights whatsoever. And a good example is you can look at, what's happening to us day to day, what's in the news with the football players. Now, I'm going to bring up this example about the football player here that I just read about that has this thing. He's been suspended because of child abuse. Now, in the same newspaper where I read that article, 2 weeks ago, I read an article about a child about 5 or 6 years old in Mississippi that was brutalized at school, and they had a picture of this child. The child had swollen face, closed eye, both eyes brutal, as far as look like what they call black eyes. When the child turned sideways, the face looked like it was twisted, looked like the child had been in some kind of auto accident. Now, the mother came to the school to pick this child up when the school would normally end, and she was shocked to see the condition of her child. No one from the school called this mother to say, hey, your child has injuries. No one at the school, it appears to me, tried to give this child any first aid. No one called the police. No one called the ambulance. It was just really mind-boggling and amazing to see. Now, for a thinking person, when the school was asked, why didn't you call someone, they said, well, the child said they were beat up on the playground by another child and kicked in the face repeatedly. Now, with the understanding that we are in a system where we are the victims of a race war, how could you understand why a school would not call this mother or do anything without you knowing anything about this case or even seeing a picture of this child? What kind of conclusions could you come to if somebody told you this story like this?
Lack of codification. Everything is going to have to be codified. Codification just means you have a set way of doing everything. You don't leave out anything. You don't make any room for guesswork. That's what is needed. It's what you call a disciplined society. If you're going to have any kind of order ever in any society, in a tribal society, you have to have some type of code where things are done the same way each and every time, and that same way is the best way. First of all, find out the best way to go about handling every situation that there is, because there is a best way to handle every situation. There's no such thing as just, well, we don't know where to go with this, except in a society where you don't know where to go with this. But once you ascertain some things by trial and error, you latch on to the thing that works best. And this is what has not been done in a lot of areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. You need to compensate for lack of knowledge and understanding of how to handle a particular situation. And so there's no universal agreement on how these things should be conducted. So, you shouldn't have in some places where teachers whip children and other places where they don't. No, that shouldn't be. Make up your mind which is going to be. Are you going to have teachers whipping children everywhere? And if the answer is no, okay, well, let's get on the same page, because it means that there will be no whipping by teachers of students anywhere. Now, there are some people who say, well, my religion says spare the rod and spoil the child and all like that. And that's how that got infused into some school systems. See, so everybody should understand, get the same understanding. Maybe this so-called corporal punishment should be done away with altogether. Altogether. You say, well, what about unruly students? Now you're going to have a code for that. See, there's a code for everything, or should be. Otherwise, you have what? Confusion. And wherever you have confusion, you're going to have somebody being mistreated. You can guarantee that. There shouldn't be any confusion about anything ever. Now, I'm not just talking about so-called whipping of children in schools and all like that, or the Ray Rice situation, all like that, shouldn't be any confusion. Everything should be letter perfect. I mean military perfect. Do's and don'ts. No in between. Do's and don'ts. Never no in between. Never no scratching your head and foot shuffling, talking about what do we do in a case like this. That's a danger sign. There should be an exact code for every situation that there is that takes place on this planet, minute by minute. And nobody deviates from the code. Nobody. That's what I mean by codification. Now, the white supremacists, they have a code for white supremacists and for maintaining white supremacy. But everything else that looks like it might be a danger to white supremacy, that's why you have all that laxity in everything else. As long as there's no danger to the system of white supremacy, then that's when they have all this, what? Confusion. Because they thrive on the confusion of their victims. So the one thing that we should do, what I write about is what to do about things, not just about the hand-wringing and crying and lighting candles and saying we're going to have protests again and again and again. It's to codify everything so there's never any misunderstanding about anything. Never. Misunderstanding brings about confusion. Confusion brings about chaos. And people who have ill intentions thrive off of chaos.
TalkTameRadio.com. Check us out on WCRS FM 98.3 Wednesday and Sunday evenings. Blogs and podcasts are available. Download TalkTameRadio.com app to your cell or tablet. We go where you go. Radio, the way it should be heard. Stay right there. Terence Howard's comments coming up next here on TalkTameRadio.com.
TalkTameRadio.com is the premier internet radio platform offering 40-plus talk radio-style programs professionally produced, optimized for online distribution, featuring Columbus, Ohio on-air personalities. TalkTameRadio.com offers listeners diverse programming options covering topics such as arts and culture, love, life and relationships, technology, religion, paranormal activities, local and national politics, women's issues, alongside health and wellness. Listeners can access their favorite TalkTameRadio.com programs free of cost through the website. Download the TTR app to your cell phone and you can take us wherever you go. We have programs on demand to fit your schedule through our podcast. The address is TalkTameRadio.com. Saturday, September 13th, the New Faith Baptist Church of Christ will sponsor a community festival. The festival will be held at 955 Oak Street from 11 a.m. until 5 p.m.
There will be fire safety.
Have you ever wished you could spend more time with your kids, or maybe quality time with your spouse, when you can actually have an uninterrupted conversation? Do you owe your dad a little catch-up time? Well, it's time to reconnect, and no activity can bond a family together quite like boating and fishing. I mean, think of all the great experiences you had as a kid when you went boating or fishing. Well, guess what? It's still great. Boating and fishing are the perfect opportunities for your family to get away, to talk, to laugh, to create new memories. So take someone you love out on the water and see where the water takes you. If you haven't been on the water in a while and you're not sure where to start, or if you just like to have some helpful tips for your next trip, please visit takemefishing.org. This has been a public service of TalkTameRadio.com. Radio, the way it should be heard.
You wouldn't think the cafeteria would be a scary place.
There are 5.9 million kids in the U.S. living with food allergies.
It happens to me on the school bus.
And a third of kids with food allergies are bullied because of it. Right now, we're working on a cure for food allergies. Until then, there is a cure for food allergy bullying. You. Go to foodallergy.org to teach your kid about the seriousness of food allergies.
If I'm not at school, I can't get bullied.
Food allergy bullying. It's not a joke.
Goodwill is a global social services enterprise and the leading nonprofit provider of job training programs and career services in the United States and Canada. To pay for its program, Goodwill sells donated clothes and other household items in more than 2,700 stores and online at shopgoodwill.com. Goodwill uses the revenue earned from these sales to fund job training, employment placement services, and other community programs. The goal of the campaign is to increase goods donations to Goodwill, inspire an emotional connection to the Goodwill brand, and to elevate preference for Goodwill.
In the small town of Elmira, New York, a boy was born into an all-American family. The odds of him opening his own clothing store at the age of 18? 1 in 138,000. Excited to be a part of pop culture, he packed for the big city. The odds of him achieving his dream in the fashion industry? 1 in 23 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I am Tommy Hilfiger, and my family is affected by autism. I encourage you to learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs. Early diagnosis can make a lifetime of difference.
Brought to you by Autism Speaks, the Ad Council, and TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
Supporting minority education. I'm Sean Booker, dammit, from The Melting Pot. I'm here to tell you that as the mother of a high school senior, I know due to financial circumstances, many of America's deserving minority students do not have access to a college education. Since 1944, the United Negro College Fund has sought to provide one. Since 1972, the beginning of this campaign, UNCF has helped more than 300,000 talented students earn a college degree. I'm Sean Booker, dammit. Give a helping hand.
The Franklin County Consortium for Good Government presents Meet the Candidates Forum 2014. Join TalkTainmentRadio.com show host Eva Shell Lee as she moderates the live campaign debates September the 30th at Peace Lutheran Church, located at 455 Clark State Road in Gahanna, Ohio. Come out and meet the following candidates. For the Ohio State House, the 20th District, Heather Bischoff and Dan Medford. For the U.S. House of Representatives in the 12th District, David Arthur Tibbs, Bob Hart, and Pat T-Berry. For the Franklin County Common Pleas Court, Chris Brown and John Gonzalez. For the Ohio State Senate, the 3rd District, Star Johnson and Kevin Bacon. For the Ohio State House 19th District, Michael Johnson, Chad Monin, and Ann Gonzalez. This is a public service of TalkTainmentRadio.com. Radio, the way it should be heard.
The United Independent Compensatory Code System concept by Neely Fuller is considered as one of the substantial and basic books for understanding and effectively countering racism. Neely Fuller will turn upside down everything you've heard and everything you think you know about racism and how it works. Call area code 202-484-5461. 202-484-5461.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
You got the power.
Alrighty, welcome back to the second portion of the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com. Live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Before we go to Terence Howard's comments of last week, caller, you're still on the line. Do you have a quick question that you want to answer so that we may move on? A quick question.
Yes, real quick. I just wanted to say, Mr. Fuller, if you would just look at the picture of this little girl, it would tell you everything as to why these people did absolutely nothing. Our children are also on the battlefield, and we have to understand that war is being waged on all of us. Thank you.
You have a response for that, Mr. Fuller?
Yes, I agree with, and we are all children. If you're a victim of racism, you are in a childlike state. You're in a childlike capacity. You have the power of a child, which is powerless when it comes to the seniors who are over you. And in this case, as prisoners of war. If you are a non-white person on this planet, you are a prisoner of war. And the war is being waged by those people, not all people, not all white people, not even most, possibly. We don't know the numbers, but we do know that there is such a system as white supremacy, and it's the most powerful political system and the most powerful religious system on this planet. And it is in the way of people becoming the type of people, both white and non-white, that people ought to be. It's a system that's been around ever since it started. I don't know when it started. Some people say it as far back as 2,000 years. But it's a system that has to be replaced with a system of justice if we're going to have these problems straightened out. Now, you have to codify that process. That's the thing that's been missing. What is the process for bringing this about? Yes, and since the white supremacists don't want to do it themselves, they keep dragging their feet, and that's understandable because they profit from it. Then the people who are not white supremacists, meaning the non-white people, and the white people who don't believe in racism, should be focusing on how do you produce a product to replace it, and that product would be a thing called justice. And getting to the specifics, that would include how do you treat children? You talk to them. That's what I recommend. You don't beat them. Now, some people may say, well, that's how I was raised and all like that. No, you're sending a message that that's how you settle everything. If you're going to teach a child that if you don't do what I say, I'm going to beat you within an inch of your life, then that child grows up walking up and down the street saying, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to beat you within an inch of your life. And if I can't beat you physically by my muscle power, I'll get a gun. And then I know you'll do what I say do or else, because you will be dead if you don't. Now, that's a message that's been sent all too often, either directly or indirectly.
Yes, sir.
So you settle things by talking to people in a civilized manner.
TalkTameAtRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. That's radio the way it should be heard. This is Mr. Bobby, and you are listening to the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTameAtRadio.com, radio the way it should be heard. And if you'd like to call in, we do have a phone line that is now open, and that number is 1-877-932-9766. Last week, Mr. Fuller, we got a news feed concerning a comment that Terence Howard had made, and the phone lines here blew up. The emails blew up, and I just want to repeat that comment that Terence Howard made last week. He said, quote, "Wow, Ray Rice. Nah, brah. Well, I guess he had to learn this the hard way. His life is ruined. He's lost tens of millions of dollars. Dating black women will ruin your life. They always ruin a successful black man. And they wonder why we are running from them in droves. Moral of the story, leave the black woman in the ghetto. Get you a white girl." End of quote. That, Mr. Fuller, extremely ticked off, enraged a lot of women, particularly a lot of black women. And what is your comment on that again?
Well, that here again, anything, the code that I have written requires that I listen to everything that any person says on the race issue, white and non-white, because that's a person's viewpoint. And I want to hear their viewpoint. I already know mine. But anything that a person is thinking, they'll be apt to act on what they're thinking, or at least say what they're thinking, or they should say what they're thinking if we're going to have honesty in this dialogue. So I am duty-bound just to listen to what another victim of racism says. Presumably he comes under that category. about race, racism, or counter-racism. I've written that in my book. Anything that any victim of racism says, they have what you call VGQ, Victims Guaranteed Qualification, which means you can talk about your victimization in any way that you want to. As a victim, you have earned that. And so if you're a non-white person, you come under VGQ, Victims Guaranteed Qualification. You're qualified to say anything about race, racism, or counter-racism, meaning your recommendations for how to get rid of racism that you wish to say. You have earned that by being a victim. If you can't do that, then you have nothing. So I just listen to what was being said, and then I say, well, I'm required to say these words. He said what he said. Take into consideration what he said, each individual, and then think about what he said, what the value is of it, not so much who said it, but whether or not it should have been said by anybody, and whether or not the recommendation is something that should be followed by anybody, because there was a recommendation made. But see, I recommend that there be no sexual intercourse between white and non-white until this race issue is settled. That should be the last thing. Now, even though there are millions and millions and millions of people accelerating the process of more and more sexual intercourse between white and non-white, that's obvious, okay? But I still recommend that's not the best way. Because of what? It causes confusion. That's what. That's putting the cart before the horse. It should be done according to my recommendation. The way it should be done is not going to be done that way. I mean, right now it seems like worldwide. But the best way to do it, as the best way to do everything, is to get the school situation straightened out first. Education is important. Get the money straightened out, the economics. Get that straightened out first. Now, we understand that when it comes to just one-on-one. Now, what I'm saying sounds absurd when I'm talking about millions of people, but the same principle still holds for one-on-one or whether you're talking about millions. Now, we understand it when we're talking about one-on-one. The young lady will say, well, wait a minute. You want to go to bed with me? I mean, who are you? What's your name? What are you going to do for me? What kind of guarantees do I have out of this arrangement that we are going into? I mean, or do we just jump in bed and then sort everything else out later? Now, the average female nowhere on the planet goes about doing business that way. When she meets a fellow, she says, wait a minute, before you start putting your hands on me, let's talk. Let's talk about how we think. Let's talk about what you like, what you don't like. Let's talk about how you see the world or what your ambitions are. And we can get on some type of communication page before we just jump in bed. Now, the white supremacist philosophy is, when it comes to black and white, just jump in bed first, produce a whole bunch of varicolored offspring, and then start talking business about whether or not you're going to have a decent house or a decent education or correct labor force. I mean, and all the areas of activity, whether or not the offspring that you have are going to be given the consideration that law enforcement should give them in the courts and all like that. These things should be done first. Then get in bed last and have a grand old time. But the white supremacist philosophy is all you dark-skinned people just jump in bed with white people and let them call all the shots, make all the decisions about your future. It's not going to even be even Steven when it comes to talking about your future after we get out of the bed. Wow. That's not the way to go about doing this thing. That is not doing business in a business-like manner.
1-877-932-9766 is the number that you may call to get in contact with Mr. Fuller, and we do have looks like two lines open, but we do have a caller on the line. Go ahead, caller, with your call for Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, caller.
My opinion on Terence Howard's comment, and I feel that, well, first of all, I'm very disappointed in Terence Howard. I was a Terence Howard fan, and I put emphasis on was because I don't agree with his comment about black women ruined the football player's life. It was not black. First of all, it was not the black woman, because the black woman is standing behind her man, unless the news is giving out false information. I'm just so upset about that. It could be. It's not a fact of whether it's a white woman or black woman. You find bad in all races. So as far as him talking about get a white girl, that's crazy. And I'm finished.
You care to respond to that, Mr. Fuller?
Well, she didn't ask a question, but I'll tell you what the code says.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller, with what the code says.
Okay, but also I do say this about black males in the code, and I say this in all the talks where I talk about the code. In the system of white supremacy, it's the black male who has failed the black female. So we are really not in position to make any demands, or even we should sheepishly make requests of the black female, but we shouldn't demand or attempt to demand or think that we're entitled to demand anything from a black female. We are losers. I'm going to say that again. Every black male on this planet is a colossal loser. We lost to the white supremacists. So when some black male steps forward and says, first of all, I'm a man, he has already said something that's not true. He's a boy trying to act like a man. And he's trying to demand that a female treat him like he's a man, and we're not in that position. I'm a black male myself. I have no qualification, none, zero, for demanding anything from a black female or any non-white female on this planet ever, until I get out from under the system of white supremacy. I want that nailed in cement, those statements that I'm making right now. No black male is qualified to demand anything, even of a half-drunk black female, because we have failed them miserably. The white supremacists chained us to them, had us both in chains, naked, helpless, whimpering like little beaten down animals. And then when they give us a little leeway, we're going to get in a black female's face and say, I'm the man, you respect me as a man, I'm entitled to tell you to do this, that, and other. No, we're not entitled to anything. Nothing, because we are losers, and all we know how to do is prey on each other and then beat up on the black female when she just says a few things about what we ought to be doing. No, we're completely disqualified. Completely disqualified. We want to get in somebody's face, get in the white supremacist's face. We have all failed to do that. So we need to stop acting and try to figure out how we're going to codify our process of becoming men.
Wow.
That's why when we even protest, sometimes, I mean, some of us don't tell the truth. Truth be told, we make signs saying, I am a man. When you're a real man, you don't have to make a sign. Everybody knows it. It shows up, and females know it when they see a real man. But they have to pretend that these boys, including me, are men. Now, that's one thing that I can ask the black female to stop doing. Stop pretending that we are men. You know that we are boys. You give birth to us. You know that we are not qualified for manhood. None of us. Period.
Wow. That's a hard statement, but that's what
I intended for it to be. We're dropping bombs today.
You definitely blew that one up. I have a question here from somebody emailed me and said this. The national, this is regarding Adrian Peterson, the national media has made Adrian Peterson the public face of child abuse, and we've heard from black people in particular about how they endured similar types of beatings and have done likewise with their own. And so I want, this is the writer, I want to know, what does this say about us, that we're primarily the only race of people who view this form of discipline as a cultural norm or rite of passage?
Say that last part again.
He says that, what does this say about us, that we're primarily the only race of people who view this form of discipline as a cultural norm or rite of passage?
And that's a question, too.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
That's what he was asking. Yes, sir.
Yes. Well, anybody who adopts that's a weak adoption, I would say, through counter-racist codified logic. So for black people, rite of passage means you need to pass out from under the system of racism. That should be the black rite of passage. I mean, even these fraternities and sororities that believe in beating up on people and whatnot and taking them through some type of ritualized rite of passage by beating them or calling them names or taking them through some type of test. That is insane. They ought to stop doing it, those that are still doing it. That should be an absolute no-no. An absolute no-no. That is completely insane. And you don't teach people that type of thing and do it under the banner of some type of sophistication. That this is some type of advancement, some type of civilizing process. It absolutely is not. And beating up on the females, which is a tribal custom among a whole bunch of black people worldwide, needs to stop this very minute. This very minute. And repeating what I said just a few minutes ago, you black males, you're not qualified. I don't care how you strut around talking about you were great kings and queens. I mean, going back to the pyramids and all this kind of... Stop shamming. Stop shamming. You're not fooling anybody but yourselves. And the white supremacists are laughing at you, laughing at all of us. You don't have a right to even talk harshly to a black female. You lost that if you ever had it in the first place, and you shouldn't have had it, because why talk harshly to people? Why beat people? Well, this is my woman. You don't own anything because you don't own yourself. Come off of it. Somebody needs to say these things, and I'm saying them because they're true. And you got to start with the truth. And we can't handle the truth, even though we're always talking about keeping it real more than anybody. But we keep it real among ourselves, and that's a fantasy. Because when we're dealing with the white supremacists, we're nothing but little whimpering animals. That's it. We know that. But we don't have to remain that way. But you got to face the truth. When you've been beaten, you say you've been beaten. Every football player knows that. If he's going to win the next game, say you've been beaten. Say that your cornerback wasn't in the correct place. Say that the quarterback is no good. Say that you can't get into the end zone on no game, rather than keep fantasizing about, well, I had a dream last night and I made 100 touchdowns. So I'm going to go with my nightmare that I had rather than reality. I'm a loser. The way to become a winner is, first of all, acknowledge that you're losing. That's in gambling, that's in business, that's in football, it's in everything that makes sense on this planet.
Mr. Neely Fuller, dropping bombs this morning. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. TalkTimeRadio.com, the world's greatest radio, and radio the way it should be heard.
Thanks for listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
The most important question in all racial matters is why. One should always ask it.
Radio, the way it should be heard.
You've got the power. The world's greatest radio. TalkTainmentRadio.com.